this one perfect? I could talk like this the whole time and I'd be much more comfortable.
No. Stop it. We're live.
Got it.
Okay.
Is there anybody watching?
You ready?
0.
0 viewers. Awesome. Hi, I'm Amy. And this is Carly Rosin. And this is Drinks with Amy. And today Carly has joined us to nervously talk about self-harm. What? Oh, we're also married.
Who's watching?
I don't know. Get over it. I don't know who's watching. So
I'm so anxious.
So what do you consider yourself like in recovery, like a self-harm, like in recovery? Or are you like a self-harm survivor? Like what do you consider? Oh, P.S. I'm drinking Jack and ginger ale, and Carly's drinking some lovely nettle tea, which is a great anti-inflammatory. It's also great for allergies, and it's pretty tasty. And
It's from David's Tea.
The New York City mug, because Carly collects these mugs.
So I can send them to me if you want.
If you're ever in a city and there's a Starbucks and it has a mug, you know where to send it. Right here. So anyway, back to my question about self-harm.
Why are you talking so loud? It's like, I'm just kidding.
I'm talking loud so people can hear me. Actually.
Oh.
So what do you...
Very anxious.
That's okay.
Okay.
You can be anxious.
I'm going to draw.
We've never really talked about this.
I know. I'm going to draw a little bit. So if I'm looking down, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm doing.
And why? What does the drawing do?
I have attention deficit disorder that was diagnosed just a few years ago. And I wish that it had been diagnosed when I was younger, because I think I would have had way less. Oh, I'm shaking the desk when I'm drawing. I draw really hard too. I finally found pencils that didn't break. Lead, because I used to crush all the lead because I'm just so hard at stuff. And so anyway, the pen's like $27 a pencil. Worth it. I don't break any pencils anymore. My office paid for it. I don't work there anymore. Anyway, I have attention deficit, if you haven't noticed. What was the question?
I was just wondering, like, what title would you give yourself in terms of, are you a survivor? Are you in recovery? Like, what's your orientation to self-harm now?
Well, unfortunately, there's not really there's no CHIPs or step groups that you can go to. And with alcoholism and drug addiction, you know, it's one drink or nothing kind of way. You know, it's either you're sober or you're not sober. With self-harm, I kind of look at it as harm reduction. Like, the less, the better, you know.
So what do you consider to be self-harm? What does that, when you say that word, what does it mean?
For me, it really means it's the way that I really learn how to self-regulate any strong emotion. There's 2 emotions that I can access immediately, which are anxiety and humor. For some reason, I think things are funny, and I can really identify with humor, laughter, and funny things, and then anxiety. Everything in between, I've had to kind of learn, and so everything else, any kind of happiness, any kind of anger, anything that's overwhelming, I will immediately look to regulate it with something usually physical. For example, right now, I'm very anxious. I am, before I came here, I chewed on my lower lip, so it's a little bit chapped. So every time I talk, I can feel it. And I'm rolling on my foot, a hard ball, because my foot hurts. But it's the thing that I'm doing with my mouth is something that I would consider harm reduction. You know, I didn't go out and get drunk. I didn't rip my hands at the gym. I just bit my lip a little bit. So that's like the harm reduction type of thing. That's because
So you still hurt yourself, just not as bad as you would have previously in your life?
Yeah, I haven't quite, self-harm was really the first thing that I really learned, my first addiction. I do have almost 9 years of sobriety, with drugs and alcohol, but it's not my first, when anything happens that's really overwhelming or anything that happens, my first instinct is always something physical. I need to have something physical happen, whether it be good or bad. It's really just taking an emotional feeling and then regulating it in my body with something physical. And usually the only thing that can satisfy that is some sort of pain. And so that's what I've come to understand. And there are, I do believe that I am an extreme form of it, where I've gone to, where I've extreme forms, meaning I've would heat up hot metal and sear my skin until I would faint. I, cut my, arms and legs and everywhere for years. I don't do that so much anymore, but it's kind of turned a corner and very, very sneaky now. Am I off topic?
No, what does it mean? What does it mean that your self-harm is sneaky now?
Sneaky now, where if I feel if I have a strong feeling, it's usually like, what is it usually? Stress. It's usually some sort of pain, or I can't even identify the words. I really just know it as anxiety. When I know it as anxiety and I don't know where to put it or handle it, I tend to make risky decisions where, because in my brain I know I can't start cutting myself and doing all these crazy things, because you can't really be an adult. You can't go to job interviews. You can't get new clients. You can't shoot a wedding. You can't be in a marriage if you have bleeding arms, all the time. And so, because I really haven't really mastered it, I'm really not completely in recovery, but I am still functioning in society and, in life. I will make risky decisions. I'll, the mildest form is, okay, it's really sunny out. I'm going to go outside and I'm not going to wear any sunscreen, and I'm going to get sunburned. Like, that's something, it's also something that I can easily say, oh, I forgot to wear sunscreen. That's very, very simple and very sneaky and very deliberate, something that I would do and that I do. And it's like almost like any emotion that I have, it's much easier to feel it in my body than it is to try to regulate it in my emotional system, and and somewhere along the line, I've always put it in my body, whether it be not eating or eating too much. Even though hating your body, whether it being, oh my God, I'm overweight and I hate my body, that still is less, it's easier to do than it is to regulate sometimes. I think, I don't know. I guess it's just something that I've always done.
And when did your self-harm, what is your sort of mental health history in terms of, is the self-harm a symptom of a deeper thing, or is it its own sort of disorder or disease, or is it indicative of something deeper going on?
I think I started doing self-harmful behaviors when I was very young. The first time I remember doing it, I was maybe 6 or 7, and I gave myself poison ivy all over my body. And I remember deliberately doing it. But I remember being very, very depressed or anxious as a kid and not understanding what was happening. And I think there was something wrong in my brain. I needed help and medication and all this stuff. And I kind of stumbled into self-harm, I think. I don't know. I don't really unpack that anymore because I spent so much time trying to figure that out. And it's just like, whatever. you know. I stumbled upon it, and then when that wasn't enough anymore, I started using drugs, and I only used drugs and alcohol for like 2-3 years, and then I've been clean and sober since then. But throughout that, the self-harm has been there, and so it's something that I became addicted to. If that's and it's because it's not technically it's not a disease, like alcoholism is a disease, but it's, I don't know, it's my drug of choice, I guess. Asking, is it? Oh, yeah.
So
I'm sweating. I can't stop looking at this fat roll.
Stop.
I know, it's a problem.
So your first memory of self-harm is when you were 6 or 7 years old.
Maybe it was 8. I don't remember. I was in 2nd grade. You're 8 in 2nd grade. Yep.
So, and what? I know you've told me that you were very young when you first felt depressed.
Yeah.
But you didn't know that that's what you felt until later, when you were in therapy and you like really had a word for what that was.
I read a book. Actually, I read a book. And
what book do you remember?
It was called Prozac Nation by Elizabeth Wurtzel, and she's a crazy writer. But it was I don't know when she wrote it, but I read it when I was, I think, 15 or 16, and I read it and I was like, oh, that there's something wrong with me. There's actually something wrong with me, because everything that every experience that I had was just, I just felt like I was looking around me and I was like, what lenses are you looking through? Because I don't understand what's happening. I just felt like I was here at all times. And I have this memory that I didn't think was a big deal, but I share it with therapists, and they're like always like, oh, yeah, it's interesting. So at my dad's house, my parents were divorced when I was young, and I always used to go to my dad's house, and he used to measure us, up against the wall at his apartment. And I remember the first or second time we did it, he measured me, and he drew the line against the wall, and I stepped back, and I looked at the wall, and I said, how could something that small have the thoughts that I have? And it was just, I didn't say it out loud, but it was I just remember I was so short, I was just a little tiny person, and my brain was so, it wasn't like, oh my God, I have these great thoughts. It was like, these thoughts are dark, and they shouldn't be so dark, and
like what when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, what is a dark thought? What is that? What is a dark thought when you're that young?
The only reason why I have these stories right off the bat is because we had to write a lot of these stories down when I was in rehab. I was also in rehab twice, once for about 6 weeks, and then another time for about almost 9-10 months. And they always make you write your entire story, all of your memories, all of your really large memories, meaning like the ones that are really vivid and loud. You always have to write them down, unpack them, because usually there's something in there, whatever. I love therapy. I go to a lot of therapy. There's 3 viewers.
There were 4.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Oh. What was the question?
What's an example of a dark thought?
Okay.
If you're like 8.
So I'm at camp, and we're taking the bus I went to camp at Discovery Day Camp in Maryland, and we used to take the bus to the pool in the afternoon. And I remember leaning my head against the window, and it was kind of raining, and looking outside, and I said to myself, I said, if this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life, then I don't know if I can do it. And that is a big thought for an 8-year-old kid to have. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was like, I just didn't have the energy to continue to fight. It just felt like I was fighting all the time. I was fighting.
What were you fighting?
What I've learned is that's what depression is. It's just like that dread that I felt all the time. I just felt like dread all the time. Ugh. What are we talking about? Let's talk about some more stuff. It's dark in here.
So you have, I can turn on light. So you have
in here.
Oh,
it's dark.
So you're in 2nd grade. you give yourself poison ivy intentionally, you're on the bus to day camp, and you're like, I can't do it. I just can't do life.
Yeah.
Like as an 8-year-old, you're like, I just can't do life.
And so I think that's where the looking for outside things to regulate emotions, that's where that comes in. And because I don't think I was ever taught, or I didn't know how to express the depth of my experiences or my emotions or whatever they were. Not that they were so intense or great. They were just, I didn't know how to handle them. And so I had to find ways to do it. And I excelled in school and I excelled in sports. And when that just didn't do it, I had to find something else. And I always went to the extreme, you know.
Meaning what? The extreme of mutilation? I know you don't like
I don't
that
like
word.
that word. It sounds weird to me.
Well, but
I know that's the
I mean,
technical
if you're
term.
cutting your skin open,
Doesn't sound, I mean, it's much scarier when you say it than it is in my brain.
too bad.
Okay.
So you read Prozac Nation and you were like, oh, there are other people like me, and
Yeah.
there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Then everything kind of went crazy, and I went to therapy. Like, I immediately went from being totally perfectly fine and excelling to I wasn't eating. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't function. I couldn't play soccer. I was playing, I was very competitive soccer, and I just couldn't do anything. And I was going to therapy 4 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week. I was seeing psychiatrists. I was doing all of these things, just going all in.
And what had they diagnosed you with?
Mostly just depression. I was being diagnosed with depression. Then I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And what the problem with that is that, I didn't realize that you have to be very, very, very honest with your psychiatrist. You don't even know what that means at that age. They need to know what you're eating, what you're not eating, what time you're going to sleep, what drugs you're doing, what all this. I wasn't doing any drugs, but, my brain was changing so much and nothing worked. Everything made me feel worse and worse and worse. And it's funny, I don't really remember. All I know is that everything kept getting worse, and then I started, smoking a lot of pot, and then I went to college and everything. All I did was smoke weed and take pills, and I got really, really, really anxious and wasn't able to leave my room. Yeah.
And what was it? So
Bad
when did you go to rehab the first time?
I was 20.
And you went
After my
for 28
sophomore
days, or?
I went for 5 weeks. Yeah. And it was great. It's funny, the only places that I really ever had a good time were in my treatment centers, because everyone's there. That's all I really wanted ever, was to, have a community that, I don't know.
Community that would listen?
The community that would listen, who also felt like they were looking at the world differently, or experiencing the world the way I was. And I didn't have to be, I don't know. I just felt, I had a few, friends who I don't speak to anybody who I was in treatment with. One person.
2 people. Well, yeah, one person.
One person. And I don't know, it's the only times I ever felt like I didn't have to reach for something else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to fill whatever I didn't have to fill it with something else.
So you were 20 when you went to rehab for 5 weeks, and then you went back to school.
Went back to school, failed out.
So that was between like your sophomore and junior year?
Mm-hmm.
And then you finished your junior year?
Yeah. And
then went to rehab again?
And then, went home for a year or so. I can't really remember. It got really bad. It was really dark. And then I was sent to rehab again, a treatment center in California, where I was there for 9 months. And Yeah.
And what was the moment that you decided, I mean, rehab didn't take the first time, obviously, like it wasn't enough or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard for people to, I mean, it's hard to be young and just be smoking weed and think that everything is, that, you know, I don't know, I feel like I could always go back to rehab. There's always something new. You know, what happened to me when I was in rehab is that the second time, you know, if anyone's questioning whether they should go to treatment, just go. If you have the money, if you have the opportunity, you should go, because you get the opportunity to really, really, you get to make a choice. And a lot of times when you're living your life every day and there's everything keeps happening every day, you don't really get to decide how to live your life a lot of the time. And when you're in rehab and treatment, I don't like to say rehab either, I like to say treatment. I saw a lot, I was in there for a long time. A lot of people come in and they leave and then they die because, you know, they come in, you're able to, once you get there, you need to take some time to clear out your whole fucking system, and then something happens where all of a sudden you see all your issues, you see the path that you have to take in order to get better, and then there's a moment where you have to decide, you have to make a choice, whether you're going to get better or not. So I like to use the term, when people say, oh, I hit bottom, you can hit bottoms every day. For me, hitting bottom is when you make the decision not to get worse, when you choose to get better. And I saw a lot of people get to that point, see what they had to do, and then decide not to. And then they slowly just ease their way out. And I don't remember when I decided to get better, but I remember deciding not to get worse. And it doesn't matter why. For me, I was in love with my therapist. And, you know, I had a sponsor who said, it doesn't matter. It takes what it takes. Just keep going, and then we'll find you something new when that doesn't work anymore. And so, you know, that's what I did. And then I had a roommate who I met in AA who carried me through until I moved to San Francisco, you know. But with all of these people, with AA, and, you know, I go to meetings, I've had many sponsors, it just doesn't work for me, because what I've learned recently is that I've really never been sober in the sense of giving up my true drug of choice. I haven't had a drink or drug for, you know, in July it'll be 9 years, but I have not given up my true drug. And it wasn't until recently when my current therapist told me that I needed to see another specialist because she no longer felt comfortable treating me by herself. And I was like, you know, it really rocked my world. Can you tell them what happened? Sure. Oh. My ears are so red.
Because you're sweating.
Talking so much. So
there was something that happened recently.
Yeah. That
caused your therapist to say, you need to see someone in addition to me. So not only do you have a therapist, but you also have a psychiatrist that you see every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so back to your mental health history, at least, you got out of rehab for the second time, mm-hmm. and continued to see your therapist from rehab.
Yes.
And then you moved up here for school at SFAI.
Correct.
Because Carly's a brilliant photographer, by the way. And so you moved up here to study photography and eventually found a new therapist.
Yes.
And who's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And she got you connected with a psychiatrist who altered your medication and who tested you for ADHD, right?
Yeah, I was struggling so much, and I was
in school.
I was struggling. I was actually struggling at work. That was the hardest part. What was happening is I was really, really suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, but it wasn't, I was acting obsessively, but it wasn't OCD. Like it changed all the time. When I had a thought in my brain, I could not get it out, and it would interfere with me being able to listen to orders at work. And it was becoming a major, I was getting in trouble for being insubordinate because what they were asking me to do was not loud enough. These thoughts were louder. And so
So you were a barista.
I was at Starbucks, and when someone said, "Hey, I need you to go ring," and I saw the napkins were empty, I could not go ring at the register until I completed that task. It hurt my teeth. It was overwhelming, and then I started talking to Alexis, my therapist, about it, and she said, "You need to talk to your doctor. You've got to talk to them." And I explained it to them, and I go to UCSF, University of San Francisco. It's a great place to go. I recommend going to a teaching hospital because they have a team. Everyone's on. There's like 10, there's 3 people in the room. There's a doctor, there's a supervisor, and a student in the room. They're all with their clipboards and asking. It's great. I love it because there are multiple opinions. They need to be on the edge of their seats.
Well, and they're generally on the cutting edge of medicine because they have to keep the education of these doctors has to stay.
And they want to get an A, so they're going to do the best they can, which is nice. And someone just said, "I think let's just give you this test." And I was off the charts with these tests because she kept saying, "Why didn't you ever get tested this?" And I said, "Oh, I'm anxious. I'm just anxious. I'm just anxious. It's just anxiety." And she was like, "No, let's just try this." The next day, my life changed with a low dose.
What did they test you for?
They tested me for ADD, and then halfway through the test, I was given a different test, and then she started writing the prescription before I even finished it. And my life was totally different. And I'm still getting, I'm on a good dose right now, a very high dose of extended release of Ritalin. And I take a lot of other medications, but this has been the only medicine and treatment that has ever helped me significantly.
And that was
Ritalin.
3 years ago? 2 years ago?
2.5, maybe 3 years ago. Yeah. I think I would have had a lot less issues.
Well, because once you had an ADD diagnosis, we talked to SFAI about an individualized education plan. Thank you, Emily, my sister, who was like, she's a speech therapist, and she was like, "Oh, you have to get Carly on an IEP because that's a diagnosis that warrants an individualized education plan." Yeah. And once that happened,
I used to write papers at night, and I would start the paper the night before, and then the next day I would be a totally different person because I was so crazy because the thoughts up here were so big and I could not get them out, and it was so frustrating and made me so crazy that I'd want to die. It was so frustrating. And the teacher would say, "Why couldn't you do that?" I would fail, and it was extreme. It was excruciating. Mm-hmm. And it was interfering anyway.
Yeah, so you got the IEP, you got proper medication. I
got straight A's. I failed out of one college, and then I got straight A's at another school.
Yeah. Post-treatment, ADD medication, all of that. So now to what happened recently, because that shift, the ADD diagnosis and the Ritalin, that was 2-3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So on the level of the development in your self-harm recovery and hopefully sobriety someday, what happened recently that caused alarm in your therapist?
Well, I feel like I've been slowly on this path, not of destruction, but I keep running into the same problem everywhere I go. And I create these, that's a bigger story.
What do you create?
I create like my family dynamic in all my workplaces, and I keep getting fired and keep getting in trouble at all these jobs that I've poured my life into, like over and over again. It happened 3 times, and all of a sudden I was like, what the hell's going on here? And it was like, I'm sober, I'm doing all this work, there's got to be something else that's wrong. And that thought happened a few months ago, or maybe 6 months ago. It's been slowly kind of churning in my brain, and haven't been feeling well. Feeling well and being like, when I say I'm not feeling well, I mean just depressed and anxious and not understanding, not knowing how to regulate. And I'd had another disappointment at a work situation, and I had to stand up for myself and blah, blah. I went for a run. By run, I mean I walk up some stairs quite quickly. That's a run for me. I had an intense conversation with somebody about a new work situation.
The staffing agent.
A good but it's intense conversation. I was running and up these stairs, and there's a there's like these concrete stairs that I was jumping up onto. And I was jumping, I missed one of the steps. I kind of scraped my knee, I jumped again. And then I said, knowing that there was a very good chance that I would fall, I jumped. And I jumped and I didn't hit the jump. And not only did I not hit it, I hit the corner of it with my shin. And there was a hole in my leg. I looked down. I was hoping for maybe a scratch or a little bit of a bruise, but instead I could see my shin bone and I had to go to the hospital. And it was just the fear that I felt when I looked down and saw pretty much inside my own body. It was like, I hear all these stories in AA when I hear someone say, oh, I took a drink and then I ended up in Milwaukee, with a hooker. Like I hear those stories and they don't know how they got there. For me, it was like I jumped expecting to get a scrape and I ended up in the hospital. And I've never lost control of, a self-harmful act. I've always been able to take care of it myself, whether it be with, Neosporin or whatever it is. You've
always been able to do your own first aid.
Yes. And it was terrifying. Because I also faint a lot and I couldn't walk and it was really scary. But then, what was even scarier, not to me, but to my therapist, was I told her about it and she goes, I was kind of high for like a week after it happened. And that's when my therapist said, she's like, it scared me. And I was like, oh, great.
So who is this new specialist and what do they do and how is that different from what you've done before?
I'm not this might not be I'm learning DBT, which I don't know anything about besides the name of it. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy. It was first created for people with extreme bipolar and borderline personality disorder, people who cannot regulate their emotions and are given a step-by-step guideline for each emotion. And so this group, I don't know if this is going to be the group that I stick with, but this is just it's not a processing group. It's a study group. So it's like, we're going to go in, it's 8 months. There's 2 facilitators. We go through a step, we have homework and we work through it. So it's like, I'm going to learn this process, which I think is the way that you have to do it. I don't know. Red my ears.
Okay.
So sweating. Anyway, that's what this group is. And you must be in therapy as well. But I'm hoping that it'll be kind of like my 12-step work, because I've never been able to.
That's never really resonated.
Never. I've tried so hard, and I've punished myself for not working. I go to meetings and I walk out and I'm like, I feel worse.
Did you feel like it should be working better than it is, or?
Yeah, because I've done the all in, I've done the all out, I've done it all, and really CrossFit has helped me a lot. But I think it's also because it's very physical. It's about community and working together and being together, but also an immediate physical reaction.
Mm-hmm. So when you go, CrossFit is really intense.
Mm-hmm.
When you
That's
go
my harm
to
reduction.
So when you go to the gym, can you feel the line between? Yes. What's the line? It's the line between just exercising and punishing yourself, or harming yourself.
Yeah,
because exercise is one of those socially acceptable self-harm practices.
What's also important for me in personally my disease that's different from other people's disease. A lot of people are very private about their self-harm. I am not. I need you to know that there's something wrong with me physically. And if there's no one there to see it, then I don't want to do it, which is very, what's it called? Just from in my disease, which is different than other people's, whatever. A lot of people are very private with their self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
I am not. You must know what's happening. And people, it often comes off as I'm complaining, but I just need you to know what I'm feeling because I can't describe it, And so with CrossFit, there's a point where I've really, people get hurt, like people, like they rip their hands open, they go so hard that they can't walk. And for me, how I've done my harm reduction in CrossFit is mobility, is just really understanding how to really, I can take care of my body physically, from start to finish, so that I just have to be careful whether I don't eat or, I just have to.
So you do a ton of injury prevention and a ton of muscle recovery and that sort of thing, so that in the event that you do cross that line,
it's
you're
like
not debilitated.
It's really me taking my disease or my self-harm and trying to make it be positive, because my favorite part of the self-harm part is the taking care of the injury. And so the harm reduction version of that is me working out really hard, liking my body, being a part of a group, and then recovering, doing the mobility and the active recovery as my soothing. And so that's how I look at it, and that's why I let it go as far as I can, because it's okay. That's the harm. I talk a lot with my therapist about this exactly, and this is kind of the best scenario for it. And so we just kind of.
And how have other people, like socially, professionally, how have other people in your lifetime reacted to your self-harm? Like, do people ask you about your scars? Like, how did people react in high school when you have a new cut or a burn? Like, what was that?
I mean, I think it's very scary to see, because it's just scary looking, and people don't really understand. I mean, I don't really understand, but a lot of people don't understand how to react to it. And people do ask me, and I don't like it. I really don't like going into new jobs. It's the only thing that I see. I'm holding my arms. I've got some scarry arms. You don't notice. Hey now. But hey. So that's what my arms kind of look like. And it's like I'm equally proud and embarrassed. It's like it's equal. It depends on where I am. So when I go into new jobs, or if I go meet families or something, I'm very, very, very self-conscious. But at the same time, I would not erase them, which is very, confusing. I don't like when people ask me,
But in CrossFit, you want everyone to know.
But I want you to see it, but I don't want you to ask me. I know, it doesn't make sense. I don't get it yet, but.
But how have your peers responded to you? Like in high school?
I don't remember in high school. Really don't remember. I was too fucked up in high school.
Mm-hmm. So when you see someone else.
Yeah.
Who on their body has evidence of active self-harm, what do you say to them? Or how do you approach them?
It's difficult, because it's hard to not, when you go to rehabs, all of the eating disorder people are all in a separate group, and they keep them all together, and they're very, very competitive, and it's a really close-knit group with constant supervision, and that's what I feel like I would need as well if I was in another group like that, because I would immediately compare and immediately, I don't know. So, I'm trying to think of how I would react. Some people will come and, people ask my dad about, if their kids if they're experiencing things, and sometimes, every once in a while, someone will ask me, but what to do. That's what you're asking me, kind of what to do or how to.
No, I'm just wondering how people reacted to you
Yeah.
when
They were scared. They're mostly scared. They're mostly, I don't understand that you're trying to kill yourself. And it's not, it's the same thing as, I look at it as the same thing as any other kind of acting out. You're sleeping around, if you're not eating, if you're
self-destructive behavior.
any kind of self-destructive behavior is the same. This one just looks a little scarier. And there's a, yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's just like.
You're actively bleeding from self-inflicted.
Whatever. I'm just gonna, damn it. It's depression me. It's just, I don't know.
So how is it different from suicide? Because you've said many times that self-harm and suicide are different. So how is it different in your experience?
Because suicide is, I mean, being suicidal is its own disease. I mean, I've wanted to, it's like, I wanted to not live. I've never been actively looking to commit suicide, which I think is different. It just looks kind of the same. People that try to commit suicide, they usually only have 2 really big scars, and that's it. You know, with self-harm, it's like I said, when I saw the inside of my leg and I realized that I needed extra help, that was the scariest moment, because I knew that I had to rope some more people in to help me, which it's different. It's not the same. Maybe it is for some people, but people that I've experienced who are active in self-harm, who, you know, who are addicted to it the way that I am, then it's different.
So what, like, if there's someone who encounters this, that is, you know, that has self-harm tendencies,
mm-hmm.
and they're the only person that they know who are like that, what would you recommend to them? Like, what resources would you recommend? What would you tell them?
Well, I don't like when people talk about teenage girls cutting themselves. I find that to be whatever. I guess that's just,
well, I mean, there was always
popularized.
I mean, I feel like there's kind of a misconception that
However, I was a teenage girl when I started, which is funny.
Right, but I feel like there's this misunderstanding that it's a cry for help. Like it's a not a cry for help. It's a
all cries for help.
Well, they're all but it's more to get attention.
Yeah.
Like it's about getting attention.
I needed attention. You know, it's like, I mean, I'd like to turn all of those things, because like,
mm-hmm.
I needed attention, and I needed,
But I feel like it's at least when I was in high school, there was kind of this flippant sort of, oh, that's just so-and-so, and they're just a drama queen, and they're just trying to get attention, and that sort of thing, rather than like a real compassionate response of, wow, that's an extreme reaction to life.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something wrong with their brain chemistry, or maybe there's a deeper issue happening. So, you know, what I'm trying to say is that for people whose drug of choice is self-harm, or whose tendency is self-harm, who,
hello,
yeah, open that?
Sorry.
For other people who are self-harmers, and the only response they're getting is people are afraid of them, or people are just flippant about their reality, or whatever, like, what would you say to them?
Well,
and I know that you're not like a self-harm activist or anything, but
not an activist, but I believe I am an expert, because it's been
25 years.
It's been 15 years that it's been active in my life, and I'm in those years. I've been pretty much on a constant. My Ritalin's gone. Yeah, it's been 12 hours. My Ritalin's out of my system, so I have a hard time getting my words. I've been on this route. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Sure. A path.
The path, that's the word. I've been on the recovery path for about 15, 16 years. And I still, I lost it. It's it's a way to regulate.
If you don't know what to say to them, that's okay.
Well, it's more like
So
I have it.
okay.
You know, they need help, and you don't have to be scared. And for me, I just didn't know how to say what I needed to say. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't even say that I didn't know how to say it. You know, I remember saying to my therapist, Alexis, when I realized that she was really good, is when I said, I feel like there's just something I need. And she said, what do you need from me? And I said, I don't know. But it was like she'd finished my self-harm need was finished by her sentence. So it was like, what do you need from me? And I was like, I don't know what I need, but I realized that I needed something from her.
Well, you needed her to ask you.
I needed her to do something, and that was, I was self-harming because I needed her to know something. And that was like a light bulb in my brain. And it's,
so with regard to like teenagers or young adults or even adults
mm-hmm.
who are, struggling with this, what are the resources? Who should they talk to? What are the resources? And then the second question is about parents. Like, if a parent notices these tendencies in their child, what are the resources and what can they do?
Yeah. I just feel like they need to be talked to, and not if someone's doing something that is showing up on their body, that means that it's too big for their brains. It's too big, and they need help. And the help is just, it's different for everybody.
But in general, therapy.
I would say therapy is.
And therapy is different from psychiatry. Yes. Having a therapist is different from having a psychiatrist, mm-hmm. because the therapist is actively working with you to break down your patterns and monitor your mental health and keep you getting better. Yeah. Right. And then the psychiatrist is primarily a chemist.
Yeah. And I think both are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pro rehabs, pro treatments, pro psychiatry, pro medication, and pro therapy, and pro AA and NA and all of those groups. I'm pro all of it. And you just got to find somebody who and you also have to shop for therapists. I've had some bad therapists, and once you find one, it's the most important relationship to have, because
you also have to be honest.
Yeah.
With your therapist and your psychiatrist.
And the psychiatrists don't give a shit about you. They just need the information. And that's very important for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Don't lie to your psychiatrist. They don't care. You can lie to your therapist. That's fine. Because, they're
not going to be able to help you.
But the psychiatrist needs to know. And that's what I learned. And that's why I like going to these hospitals, because there's like 10 people in the room. It's 100 degrees. They all have got clipboards. They're all asking questions. But it's like, I don't care.
They're not passing judgment.
No, they need to have all the information. They're stirring in a cauldron. They need to know exactly what's happening. And it's exhausting to when something doesn't work, and when you go to them for help and it doesn't work at first. It takes a long time, and that's when you keep asking me about my childhood. I'm like, I can't imagine having to go back and do that again. I didn't even want to go back and think about it anymore, because it was just, if I knew then that I'd be sitting here jumping off of that cliff and knowing that I had a hole in my leg, at 16 in that doctor's office with the really, hot leather seats. But
so what? This is just the last question.
Okay. Oh my God, I don't ever talk about this with people, which is funny.
High five! Give me your hand.
So it's okay.
I forgot my question.
It's too bad. There's a spider in our bedroom. It's really a problem for me. What's the question?
I can't remember.
I have attention deficit.
Yeah, you distracted me.
I know. Just get some help. Just talk to people. And it gets better. I know that I'm not like a super,
You're not a role model.
I'm a super low key, sad guy. I just can't, but there's a lot of things that I really like. And there was a long time where I couldn't, when someone asked me,
I remember.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
There was a long time where I never, ever, ever, ever felt good. Like there was no points in my day that were ever good, ever. And now I can, I have to make these, gratitude lists. And there's a lot of things that I actually enjoy, which is a lot to say. Because
yeah. So my final question is, what role has faith played in your life and in relation to your self-harm and recovery?
We have to answer those questions when we're with your sponsors, and they always ask you like to draw your higher power. I have been talking to God even when I was very young. Even when I was leaning up against, even when I was leaning up against that window in that bus when I was in camp, I was talking to God. I wasn't talking to myself, and someone just talked to Amy's computer.
Answer the question.
Anyway, it's only when I get really, really, when I've destroyed everything, not destroyed everything, but when I've when I'm at my lowest is when I actually turn to faith, which is unfortunate because, I wish I could remember when I was okay. But at my lowest points, and I can finally ask for help. And I'm always shocked every time. I'm always like, I always forget to do that. And it always, always, always works. And it's shocking every time. And also when I was in rehab, I didn't understand I didn't really understand how to get better. I didn't know what the steps were, because sometimes there's too many steps. You don't really know where to go. Linda, my old roommate, said to me, you just do the next right thing. And that's spirituality, and that's faith. And just do the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And that's how because I used to say it's very self-harmful. Hey God, I know, like, why would you even listen to me? There's so many things out there for you to do. And, and Linda, I remember, would just say, just do the next thing and then keep going. And then all of a sudden the path gets really clear.
Well, thank you, Carly. High five. Good job. Derek wasn't with us this week, obviously, because he's in Cuba right now. He will be with us for our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks. Frantically looking up the date.
You know who knows the date? Linda. She knows the dates for some reason.
Okay. June 15th. So June 15th, we will have our next episode. So keep an eye on Facebook to find out more information about that. And thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next time.